Today's episode is going to be a practical review of the Fujifilm XT-30 II. I'm going to tell you a bit about some of the experiences I had, what I think works well, what I think could be better on this camera. So it's going to be about the body design, color science, the performance itself, some of the things that I noticed, stacks of examples, little how-tos and pictures. So let's not waste any more time. Let's do so. First things first, let's have a look at the actual body. The first thing that we see in the XT-30 II is, like with most Fuji cameras, is a very minute grip. And even though it's a small camera, the first thing I put onto it is a grip. You see this little grip here? It's very simple. It leaves open. Actually, it's big enough for you to leave the battery door very well uncovered. You can put a nice little plate next to it for your tripod while still having access to your memory card and your battery. Now the second part is about the dials and some of the setup menus, and the first thing that I've noticed here is in this camera, of course, you don't have a dedicated ISO button, so that's one of the first things you need to set. And the great thing is you go into your command dials and you can basically change them. What Fuji has done, on the front you see a little dial which you can click in and you can then pre-program. You see here how to do this, literally going over the screen. Now that took me a bit of time to get used to, but to be very honest to you, once you get used to it, yes, I know if you're shooting with a 27mm, you don't have an aperture ring, the ISO button, you don't have it. You can have it literally with 1 or 2 clicks. You can have it the entire time at the tip of your fingers. Really nice, really made the shooting experience so pleasant. And then there is relocations of various different buttons. You see here where the Q button is. You can change basically on the back side. You've got 4 buttons on a horizontal line. You can pretty much modify them to whatever you like it. You have the FN button next to the shutter dial and the exposure compensation, which you can easily modify as well. Now a great thing what you see sitting here is the auto button, and you're probably thinking, auto button, but then you're not really a photographer. Well, I normally shoot manual, but I just quickly tried it actually on my little trip to Poland, and I quickly found out that auto button, specifically when there's a lot of things going on or the lighting conditions are changing quickly, man, that packs a punch. It really does. It's great. Then you've got the LCD screen as well, which is, you're thinking LCD screen is not a button. No, it's a touch LCD screen, which you can also use to modify some of your settings, as you can swipe to the left, to the right, to the up and the down. I don't use it, but hey, it's great that you have the option to use it. Now, number 3 here is the kind of colors of the Fuji cameras. As we all know, this comes the XT-30 II does come with the 18 film simulations currently available, and you've got Classic Neg, Eterna Bleach. Those are the 3 which are really been added, which is great. You know, I don't have the little joypad here on the XT-30 II like I'm used to on my XT2 and my XT4, but that said, you still have an FN button you can use for your film simulations. And the great thing is, with these new film simulations, it also opens the door to new film recipes. If you don't know what film recipes are, it's basically customized settings you can program into your camera to give you various different type of photo roll simulations. Now, in my case, I chose the Agfa Optima 200 color setting there, which I really like. And I believe the colors here and also the highlights give a really nice, colorful, authentic look to the pictures I'm taking. You see a bunch of them here flying by. Now, the one thing about these film simulations is that really check your highlights and your contrast, because that's where the biggest difference is actually. Those can get either blown out or crushed, whatever way you see it. Just tweak a bit with the actual settings there until you find the right spot within that simulation that really works for you. I chose Agfa for the very simple, or Agfa as we call it in Dutch, for the very simple reason that it is very good for bright daylight conditions. The same as my black and white, which I use, which is the monochrome negative. Really, really nice simulation as well. You see pictures here flying by. And what I like about this one, it gives this nice little white and black contrast without blowing up the highlights too much. Let me know in the comments what is your favorite film recipe. Important to know what kind of lenses I use it with, because I've got quite a few Fuji lenses and I normally tend to use the 27mm f 2.8, yeah, the one without an aperture ring, or the 90mm f2.0, which is a big bulky lens. And also when you buy this camera, you need to kind of keep that into account. Out of all the lenses that I have, the 90mm is by far the best. It's the equivalent of 135mm, but also the heaviest, which means is if you're walking on the street the entire afternoon, you will feel the weight dipping down into your arms. So in that way, if you're shooting with heavy lenses, the XT-30 Mark II without a tripod might not be the best choice, but for all the other lenses, go for it. It's a fantastic experience. One other thing I noticed is here in terms of performance, which is number 5 we're going into. Yeah, the battery life, which I mentioned earlier, is actually very good. People rate it as mediocre. It's only got 300 to 350 to 400 shots. Now, I mean, that normally lasts me a day, easily. Then there's the startup time of the camera. Now, this might sound strange, but I have got my Sony A7III, and that normally is 3 to 4 seconds before it's finally there. This is less than a second, which also means is that you don't have to leave your camera on the entire time. Yeah, that's why I think 3 to 400 shots on a battery are good enough. Then there's the ease of control of the camera. Yeah, I think in general it scores 4 out of 5 stars, and there's one simple reason. I think the buttons are well placed. I think they're easy accessible, for 2 buttons which I think are misplaced. First of all, the Q button, which is right on the actual thumb grip when you're walking around. I continuously got my film recipes on. I thought I was adjusting my shutter speed or ISO. No, I was actually switching film simulations. So I found it pretty annoying, and since I kind of noticed that I did it a lot, I kind of switched the entire button off, the functionality, and moved it into one of the other buttons on the horizontal. So that's point number 1. And I think that the FN button between the exposure compensation button and the shutter button, it's kind of flat. It really, you know, oh, I have my film simulations there, and I kind of have to search with my finger for it. So I would love to see that pop up a bit more. Then there's the autofocus, folks. The autofocus, even now recording this on the X-T4, Fuji has made such a gigantic leap forward from the XT1 and XT2 series, where the autofocus was way behind Sony and Canon. Now I'd say Fuji is maybe not on par, but they're very close, and you definitely notice. I notice it in the eye tracking, but I definitely notice that you don't see facial recognition jumping to the right anymore like you had on the XT2. I think that really increases, specifically when you're doing portraiture or you just want reliable tracking. Hey, these cameras are great, the XT-30 Mark II. And then there is the image quality. Now, the colors I've just discussed. One thing I didn't discuss now is the ISO handling. And a friend of mine said in a bar, you know, I normally limit it at 3200. A friend of mine said, oh, you don't have to be afraid, you know, he's a very good street photographer. You see him popping up here. So you can easily go up to 12,800, whether it's indoors or outdoors. Don't worry, you'll get a good result. So I was a bit hesitant, but I'm glad that I did, because the ISO handling on this camera is really good. And of course, you know, indoors, poor lighting, you're always going to get noise. But in general, I find it very, very pleasing what kind of results higher ISOs actually provide. And now, last but not least, is the video capabilities. Now, the video capabilities on the XT-30 Mark II are definitely not even equal to what you see on the XT4, but that's also not the point. The point is that this is a photography-centric camera with video capabilities, and I think they're sufficient. You have 4K up to 30 frames per second, which is what we all still use. 60 frames is nice, but you pay for it. Then you have a max recording time of 30 minutes. Now, I've never recorded anything longer than 20 minutes, but if you're somebody who likes to, you know, film an entire afternoon on a square or something when you're traveling, or for a wedding of your best friend, yeah, then this might not be the best camera for you. I think the biggest letdown in video is not as much what this camera can do in terms of capabilities. It's actually a hardware factor. It's the audio, which is a 2.5mm jack. I honestly don't know why Fuji is doing this, but it is there. So yeah, you have to buy an adapter, and you have to buy one to connect your audio with 2 little stripes, not 3. That's a headphone. That is quite frustrating. One last thing. It has no image stabilization. So if you're somebody who really thinks, oh, this is a perfect hybrid camera, then you're better off buying the XS10, which is far more video centric and provides you far better specs to do video. Anyways, that was it. Thank you very much. Bye bye.